Board games have a long history, and I mean long history, for about as long as people have been bored. And there's a lot to know in all that history. So we are checking out 5 things you didn't know about board games.
Board games are a traditional pastime, but there's a lot to know that you can't read in the instructions.
8,000 years ago, we know games existed.
We turned to board game expert Ian Livingstone for some little-known facts. Like, when did people start playing them?
The first known board game was a game called Senate from 5,000 years ago, which was a simple race game.
It was so popular, it even dazzled King Tut.
He had 4 copies of Senate interned with him when he died, and they were found when his tomb was opened in the 1900s.
Next, if you've ever owned property on Boardwalk, you can thank the lady whose game influenced Monopoly.
Elizabeth McGee had this game called the Landlord's Game in 1903, and it was the very first game where you could buy and sell property.
In 1933, a man named Charles Darrow was inspired by the game and invented the Monopoly we know today. He sold it to Parker Brothers, which sold millions of copies, but as for Elizabeth?
Sadly, she didn't make much money out of that. It wasn't a success for her.
Next, Scrabble wasn't always a game night favorite.
Scrabble was invented by an unemployed architect by the name of Alfred Butts. He called the game crisscross words.
But it didn't catch on, so?
Ultimately, he gave up and he sold the rights to another guy. He changed the name to Scrabble.
And it still wasn't popular, but it finally did get noticed by the right people.
The chairman of Macy's bought a copy, played it, loved it, ordered 2,500 copies. It sold out.
Which got it the triple word score it needed. The 4th thing you didn't know is how Johnny Carson saved Twister.
It wasn't so very successful, and they were about to pull the line, but their PR company had already booked it to appear on the Johnny Carson show.
And when Johnny Carson got down on the floor to play it with Ava Gabor,
the whole nation was enthralled, and it sold out all across the United States the next day.
Finally, what's popular today is a classic that might surprise you.
I think chess on a global basis is probably the one game that everybody plays, no matter what country you're from. But there's been some modern phenomena like Ticket to Ride and Catan. Games from the last 10 or 20 years have been hugely successful.
Shuffle the deck and roll the dice. Those are 5 things you didn't know about board games.